The morning after the convergence, WuDon discovered what silence sounded like when you had been rebuilt to hear everything. She knelt in the courtyard above the chamber, her palms flat against the packed earth, and tried to listen to the root lines. They were there, she could feel their vibration against her skin, a faint tremor like the memory of a heartbeat. But where before the alignment she had heard the network in full color, every grove's signature distinct, every frequency sharp, the Zagale's infrastructure singing through her communion like an orchestra. Now she heard it through a thick, persistent haze. The ringing in her ears had not stopped. It had settled from a scream to a steady tone, pitched somewhere between the cry of a harmattan wind and the whine of heated metal. It sat behind everything. It colored everything. It turned the root line network's clean signal into something she had to strain for, squint at with her communion, the way a person with damaged eyes squints at text they once read easily. The sun was warm on her neck. She could smell the courtyard's baked earth, the dry, mineral scent of laterite heated by the morning sun, and the green tang of the shea tree overhead, its broad leaves casting dappled shadows across her hands. The distant sweetness of frying dough drifted from the festival's final breakfast stalls, mixed with the smoky richness of grilled tilapia wrapped in leaves. Physical senses were untouched. It was only the communion, only the thing that mattered most, that had been burned. Samini sat beside her. He had not left her side since the chamber. His petrified staff lay across his knees, its ancient wood smooth and dark, and smelling faintly of camphor. He watched her the way a physician watches a patient whose injury he cannot treat, with attention, with care, with the specific helplessness of expertise encountering damage beyond its scope.
How deep can you reach?
He asked, no preamble, no comfort. Samini had been her teacher for 2 years, and he knew that what she needed was assessment, not sympathy. WuDon extended her communion downward, through the courtyard soil, through the packed laterite, through the root line junction beneath the building. She pushed deeper, past the junction, past the mid-layer relays, down toward the sealed boundary where the guardian waited. The boundary was there. She could feel it, a warmth, a presence, the guardian's consciousness resting beside the channel the communion key maintained. But the sensation was vague, blurred, like touching velvet through a leather glove. She knew the texture was there. She could not feel its softness. 60%. She said, maybe. The surface nodes are clear. The mid-layer is foggy. The deep boundary is. She paused, searching for honest words. Present, but I cannot read it the way I could yesterday. Samini was quiet for a time. A Hadada ibis cried somewhere above the courtyard. A harsh, nasal call that WuDon heard perfectly with her physical ears, and that her communion translated into nothing at all, where before the alignment the bird's call would have carried the faint harmonic signature of every living thing that had ever nested in that tree.
The channeling burned your communion pathways.
Samini said, his voice was careful, clinical, the teacher's voice, not the man's.
The Zagale's frequency is not meant for human tissue. You knew that.
I held the channel.
You held the channel, and the channel held you. But frequencies at that amplitude leave scarring, not physical, communion scarring. The pathways are inflamed, they will heal.
How long?
Samini did not answer immediately. He pressed his own palms to the earth, his communion reaching down through the root line junction, a shallow communion compared to WuDon's, even damaged as hers was, but 40 years of practice gave it a diagnostic precision that her raw depth could not yet match. He read the network. He read her. Weeks, he said. Perhaps longer. The key protects the core. Your fundamental connection to the network is intact. The depth you gained from the amber fruit is permanent. But the sensitivity, the resolution, the clarity that was earned through the tissue of your body, and the tissue was burned. It will regenerate. Communion tissue always regenerates, but slowly.
Weeks of muffled hearing. Weeks of straining for signals she had once caught effortlessly. Weeks of being a Tindana who could not fully commune with the earth she had sworn to listen to. The loss sat in her chest like a stone. She breathed around it. The air tasted of morning, warm earth, green leaves, the faint iron tang of last night's blood still crusted on her upper lip. The groves, she said, because the groves mattered more than her hearing. Tell me about the groves. Samini nodded. He spoke in the precise, methodical cadence of a field report. The 43 bright groves were recovering. Their root line connections, starved of clean frequency for 14 months, were brightening node by node. The northern groves, furthest from the corruption's source, recovered fastest. Their connections were short, their damage minimal, their frequencies returning to baseline with the efficiency of healthy tissue healing a shallow wound. The southern groves, closest to Ironhaven, deepest in accumulated damage, would take longer. Each grove's recovery registered as a distinct vibrational signature. The Grove of Whispers, WuDon's home grove, sending tentative pulses through the restored connection like a patient taking first breaths after surgery. But the 4 dark groves were different.
They are not recovering, Samini said. They are transforming.
WuDon pushed her communion toward the nearest dark grove, Sunyani, Nyariga's grove. She could feel it dimly through the muffled haze, the crystallized trees, the amber branches chiming in the Harmattan breeze with a sound she remembered as crystalline and now heard as a faint, distant tinkling. Nyariga's permanently embedded communion bridging surface and depths. The grove was not returning to what it had been. It was becoming something new. The crystallization is permanent, WuDon said, not a question. She could feel the permanence even through her damaged communion. The Zagale's medium had replaced the organic tree tissue completely. Crystal and light and the visible infrastructure of the deep system, surfaced and stable and irreversible.
Not just Sunyani, 3 others, all 4 dark groves are crystallizing fully. The organic material is being replaced at a rate I have never seen documented. Within weeks, they will be entirely transformed. 4 groves that are no longer groves, 4 windows into the deep system.
The circle will call it corruption.
The circle will call it what it always calls things it does not understand, a threat.
WuDon pressed her palms harder against the earth. The root lines pulsed beneath her, a warmth she could feel, a signal she could detect, a network she could still reach even if she could no longer hear its every whisper. The guardian was there, below, resting at the boundary. She could feel its patience, its willingness to wait.
The circle will send investigators, Samini continued. When they discover the crystallized groves, when they feel the change in the root line frequencies, when every Tindana in the territories reports that their communion has deepened, that the ancestral voices are clearer.
And what they cannot control, they will try to forbid.
The circle has been forbidding the truth since Nyariga's exile, deep communion, contact with Sunyani, the root road. The circle's authority rests on the claim that the Tindana tradition is the original, unbroken line of earth communion. If the root lines are engineered, if the Zagale built what the circle claims to have originated, then the foundational claim is a convenient fiction.
And now the truth is in the earth. Every Tindana who places their palms on the soil will feel the difference. Nyariga's voice reached her through the root line network, faint through the damage, but recognizable. The crystal-eyed woman in the grove of Sunyani, speaking through the permanent bridge between her embedded consciousness and the guardian. The harmonics of the Zagale's medium colored her voice, the resonance of a being part human and part system.
The 3 other crystallizing groves will need custodians, Nyariga was saying. Tindana stationed at each one, trained in deep communion. The circle's practitioners will need guidance. They have never encountered the Zagale's medium directly. They have never seen a root line glowing through the soil.
I will train them. WuDon said. The words felt enormous, an apprentice of 2 years offering to teach a tradition that had existed for a millennium. But the enormity was not inappropriate. The tradition had existed for 1,000 years without understanding what it was practicing. WuDon, who had been to the depths and returned with the communion key's permanent expansion and the guardian's trust and the irreplaceable experience of having heard the Zagalay's voice at full volume, understood. Not everything, not the millennia of accumulated wisdom the guardian carried, but the essential truth. The one thing the circle's protocols had never taught because the circle had never known it. The root lines are alive. The beings who built them are below. They are awake. They need friends, not owners. And then, quieter, the words tasting of honesty and the metallic residue of last night's blood, when I can hear well enough to teach.
The admission cost her. Samini's hand tightened on her shoulder, not in comfort, but in acknowledgement. Teacher recognizing students' honesty about her own limitations. You will heal, he said. The communion pathways regenerate, and you have the key. The depth is intact. What you lost is sensitivity, resolution. It will return.
What if it does not?
The question hung between them. Samini did not rush to answer. He sat with it the way he sat with all difficult truths. Patiently, the way the earth itself was patient, the way stone waited for water. Then you adapt, he said. You build new pathways around the scarring, the way a river builds new channels around a landslide. You use what you have. You will not be the listener you were yesterday. You will be a different listener. Perhaps, in time, a deeper one. Scarring does not always reduce capacity. Sometimes it reorganizes it.
WuDon pressed her palms to the earth. The root lines pulsed. The groves were waking, 43 brightening, 4 transforming into something the territories had never seen. The whispers were returning through the network, carrying the ancestral voices that 14 months of corruption had silenced. And the listener who had paid the price of hearing sat in a courtyard in Ironhaven with dried blood on her lip, and a ringing in her ears that would not stop, and the quiet, stubborn determination of a woman who had been rebuilt to listen and would not stop now. Not because the hearing was easy, not because the world sounded the way it should, because the earth was still speaking and someone needed to hear it, even through the damage, even through the fog, even through the muffled, diminished clarity that was all she had left of the gift that had once been crystalline. She would heal or she would adapt. Either way, she would listen. The morning sun climbed. The courtyard smelled of baked earth and frying dough and the green sweetness of shea leaves. Somewhere below, the guardian rested and waited. Somewhere to the north, the crystallized groves pulsed with amber light. Somewhere in every grove in the territories, a Tindana pressed palms to soil and felt the difference and did not yet know what it meant. WuDon knew, she would tell them. When the hearing returned, or when she learned to teach through the haze, she would tell them what the earth had said. That the root lines were alive, that the beings who built them were below, that they were awake, that they needed friends, not owners, listeners, not masters. She pressed her palms harder against the warm earth and listened, strained, muffled, determined. The groves were waking. The listener was healing. And the answer that had cost a millennium of silence and a young woman's clarity, was still there, still humming beneath the surface, still waiting to be heard by anyone willing to press their hands to the ground and pay attention.